Hello, friends. Today's video is a little different than normal. Today, maybe not for the first time, but for the first time in a long time, and kind of a thing that's out of left field, I decided I wanted to remake some stories that I've done. These stories are ones that have always done well. Their dark web stories always do well. And it has been such a long time since I've done them that things have changed significantly. And I kind of just thought, you know what? Let's take some of the best dark web stories, remake them, and use that as our second to last video. These are stories you may have heard. If you've been on my channel for a while, you've probably heard them. These may be stories that actually brought you to my channel. Who knows? These and Glitch are usually the ones where I get the most growth from. But just in the end, I was just sitting here thinking, you know what? Let's do something different. Let's remake some of the best stories I've ever done, some of the scariest stories I've ever done, and see what happens. Tomorrow's video will be new content. They will not be redone stories. It's just today, because we're on the second to last video of our big celebration, which is crazy to me that it's already coming to an end. So, yeah. Hopefully you all enjoy this. If not, I understand. You guys want new stuff. Sure. But I figured, why not bring some of the best stuff back for fun? Again, these are completely redone. These are not the original recordings. These are me now, not then. So, enjoy, friends. And just, yeah. This story isn't mine personally. I'm not the type of person to go out onto the dark web for any reason. The story actually happened to a coworker and good friend of mine, and I made sure he was okay with me submitting the story, and he said it was fine. For the sake of privacy and security, we're going to refer to him as Ron. Ron's a good guy. Probably one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he really didn't deserve the situation that happened to him. I will say that I've known him for a few years, and I completely believe everything he's told me about this. Several years ago, Ron lived in a comfortable suburban home with his lovely wife of 10 years. And for the sake of security, we're going to call her Karen. Ron and Karen had a 7-year-old daughter at the time of this story, and everything seemed alright. Ron had a good job and made more money than they actually needed. Karen was a stay-at-home mom that took care of their daughter when she was home, and ran the various errands while she was at school. Pretty much doing the basics of what a stay-at-home parent does. Ron was under the impression that their marriage was in a good position. He loved Karen as much as he always had. He loved his daughter more than life itself. They had a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and they had enough money to take care of any financial emergencies if they needed it. To the best of Ron's knowledge, they were all happy and healthy. He didn't think anything was wrong at home. Karen, on the other hand, was apparently very unhappy with their marriage and was determined to leave Ron and run off with some guy that she had met online and been talking to for around a year. Karen and her internet boyfriend had apparently spent a lot of time plotting and spoke extensively about how they could follow through on what they had planned, and what would be the best way to get the deed done. At one point, they even discussed the possibility of the internet boyfriend driving from his home in Nebraska and doing it himself, saying that he could make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Apparently, this would have been too personal, and they opted to look on the dark web for someone to remove her husband from the equation. Then, she would wait long enough to bury him, collect the insurance, and pretend to grieve. After a few months, she planned to then take their daughter and the money from his life insurance and run off with the boyfriend to start their new life up north. Based on this conversation, she was adamant that it needed to look like an accident. That way the life insurance would pay out the maximum. Like I said, Ron made good money and was worth a decent amount when dead. So she planned to live a few years off of that with the new guy. Back to their actual plan, As I said, they had the intent of going on to the dark web and finding, basically, a hitman to get rid of her husband. Apparently, they were actually successful to an extent. They got on the deep web, they found a site that listed people providing these services, and they got the information of someone they were going to pay for the entire thing. They even went as far as sending the $15,000 to the account of the person that was supposed to do the job. Thankfully, for Ron, his wife and her new boyfriend were not well versed in how things worked on the dark web, and to some extent, were kind of stupid. Apparently, they went all the way through with the plotting with this person, sent him the money, and even set a date. On the date in question, Karen had taken their daughter to her grandparents' house and had told Ron that she was going to spend the day with them. While she was gone, Ron got a visit from the local police and a federal agent. They explained the situation to him and basically took him into protective custody. When Karen got home, she expected to find her husband lying dead on the living room floor, but instead had federal agents screaming at her and taking her to the ground. What's worse, she actually brought her daughter home with her, meaning that she would have been okay with the little girl seeing her dead father. Based on what Ron was told, the police had all of the information on the conversation. They had the connection logs from when she was on the page, emails from her to the fake hitman, and enough evidence to put her away for a very long time. Apparently, she was so desperate to get rid of him that she was able to be talked into sending the money over PayPal. She literally sent $15,000 on a credit card over PayPal to have her husband murdered. I don't know if she was just ignorant, or if she wanted it done that bad and wasn't going to question the situation. Thankfully for Ron's sake, she had gotten a hold of a sting site and she was taken down without issue. The boyfriend was also arrested, and they were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and probably a few other charges related to the hitman. I believe they were both sentenced to 20 years in prison for their plans. Ron has since remarried, and his daughter is old enough to understand what her mother did. But he says that he got lucky with all this, and I agree. If his wife had gone to another page, been a little more competent, and paid just a little more attention to being secure in her messaging and communications, Ron may have legitimately been murdered that day, and she would be off living with her internet boyfriend in the Dakotas. I've been a user of the dark web for quite a long time, going through the various deep sites and seeing what's out there. There are some interesting people and pages that exist, but if you don't know what you're doing, I really don't recommend getting involved. I've been in too deep for a while, and the story I'm about to tell you was at a time in my life where I was out of control and doing stupid things. Back in the day, I used to be one of those users that may or may not have been involved in some questionable activity. Of this questionable activity, the worst was doing business with a website that was very similar to Silk Road. It was not Silk Road, but it was obviously trying to be, as dumb as that sounds, but the prices were more competitive than others. Thinking back to it now, that probably should have been a red flag. The bigger sites had methods of verification of their sellers. They knew who they were working with, and the security was definitely part of the pricing structure. But when you're a broke college kid that's addicted to certain medications, you don't really think too hard on the security of your dealer. Basically, your only thoughts are, do they have what I want and can I afford it? So, obviously, I knew what I was doing back when I got involved with these sites and these people. I knew it was illegal, and I knew that I had no way of disputing if my dealer didn't come through, and I would have no manner of taking legal action against the site or seller. The site did have an interesting system in place, though. The sellers wouldn't list what they had beyond a few cryptic user tags, and they had what they called a traffic light system. Basically, the seller could mark their stock based on a color. Green was fully stocked, yellow was limited, red was offline and not selling. If it was green, you could basically send them the money and get whatever you wanted. Yellow typically required a message to make sure they had what you wanted, and red just basically meant do not contact me. It was actually a pretty damn smart way of doing things, and it cut out having to incriminate yourself by specifically listing what you had. And it also cut down on the communication requirements. You just bought what you wanted and moved on. In my time on this site, there was one user that I worked with regularly over the 2 years. They were very dependable, and strangely enough, incredibly polite when I had to message them. I know that sounds stupid, but they typically signed their messages with, "Have a nice day and thank you for your business." Not something you would expect from a person committed to doing something that's illegal. They were the only person I wanted to work with on this website, and they always came through for me. In my time doing business with them, they had always been green or yellow. I couldn't recall once over the 2 years where they had switched over to red. Well, that is until the last time that I put in an order with them. I got on the site as normal, and I saw that he had marked himself as yellow. No big deal. I sent him a message basically asking if my usual was available. Almost immediately after, his page had switched over to red. I was a bit annoyed as he had always come through for me, and I was, as I said, an addict. I went over to his page and sent him another message that basically said, "Hey man, what gives?" Within a few moments, I got a message back that said to, put it kindly, F off. This came as an honest surprise to me as, like I said, he had always been so cordial before. I responded with something like, "Do you not want my money anymore?" I waited for an hour to see if he would message back, but I didn't get anything. It was a few days later that I went back to see if maybe he had stock again. I think part of me seriously thought that the seller was just having a bad day, or maybe it was a partner of his that just wasn't as polite. When I logged in, I saw that I had a message from him. I clicked it, and it said, "I have your usual, send me the money." I was a bit wary at first, but I was also naive and needed to keep my mind focused to study for exams. Despite my initial hesitation, I went ahead and sent him the money. I replied, told him that it was sent, and I waited. I think I messaged him once or twice within that week, but he had been offline since our last interaction and hadn't changed his account from red. About a week after our last interaction, I got the package. The box looked like it was heavily used and trashy. This was in a complete contrast from what I was used to. When I opened it, it was lacking pretty much all of the security the seller normally had. He would typically pack inconspicuous items in with the order, usually stuffed animals. I'm assuming it was because they worked as both security and padding. But instead, the box was full of packing peanuts and tissue paper. I dumped it out on the floor and checked it, thinking I was duped, but then I saw the pill bottle and an envelope with what appeared to be a letter. The first thing I did was open the letter. It said, "Consider this your last order. Jimmy is out of the trade. Thanks for your business." I was a little pissed off since I was going to have to now find a new person on the site to work with, but at the same time, it wasn't a huge deal. At least I had about 60 days before that was going to be a problem. That was until I grabbed the bottle and opened it. I removed the lid and saw that inside the bottle were fingernails. I don't mean like fingernail trimmings. I mean fingernails that had been ripped out of the bedding of the finger. 10 of them, to be exact. The edges of them looked like they had dried blood, which told me they had been forcibly removed. It was then that the letter's meaning became a bit more dark, with Jimmy being out of the trade. To answer any potential questions, I never went back to the site. I never went to any drug sites on the dark web at all. This scared me to the point that I pretty much abandoned all illegal activity. And to those that are curious, no, I did not go to the police. I wanted to. I wanted to tell them that it was possible someone had been murdered, but how exactly does one explain that with what I had? I couldn't waltz into the precinct, slam my pill bottle full of fingernails down, and say, my drug dealer has been murdered. Technically, he could have pulled them out himself. Not likely, but possible. So, anyways, that's my story. Stay off the dark web. Deep web stuff is probably okay, and don't do drugs. This happened a couple of years ago. I don't remember the exact month or year, but it couldn't have been more than just a few years ago, because Bitcoin was at or near its peak. I used to spend a lot of time on the dark web, mostly on forums and things like that, but never on anything that was explicitly illegal. I know, that sounds incredibly convincing, right? Believe it or not, there are pages on the deep web that are good for entertainment. Some of them are in the gray area as far as ethics go, but again, not explicitly illegal. And some of them only become illegal if you take action on the page, I think. Look, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know. Anyways, I was browsing pages without intent to actually do anything on them, and was just perusing through some random onion links to see what's interesting that I could find. After checking out some random pages that sold things that were definitely not legal, I found another page that was, well, definitely not legal. From the start, I knew that this page was serious. The name of the site was something like L.H. Oswald Solutions, an obvious allusion to Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated JFK. Honestly, seeing that kind of made me chuckle. Something about using Oswald's name for the page was genuinely humorous. After reading their information, it was pretty clear why they used that as the name. The entire page was meant for users to pay Bitcoin and hire a hitman. The page explained that they had top-tier men working for them, and the price categories as well. The product started at intimidation, and included things like arson, murder designed to look like a failed robbery, and had other tiers that were meant to make it look like an accident. The last one was the most expensive, obviously, and they gave scenarios on how it could happen, including hiking accidents, accidental drownings, and car troubles. Now, I had no intent on doing anything on this page other than reading what they had to say, mostly for entertainment, but then I got to the bottom of the main page. They had a full-on legal disclosure, which I thought was hilarious. It explained what actions could be taken if they failed and laid out their personal guarantee that they could find anyone and everyone without fail. Immediately after this was a small note at the bottom. We can find anyone and we can prove it. Click here for proof. Now, I know what you're thinking. No sane person would ever click on that link, and no one could be so stupid as to click it intentionally. I didn't want to, but I had to. I had to know how they would guarantee that they could find anybody. So, I clicked the button, and the page switched over to a plain black site with a smiley face and a little hourglass icon that indicated it was loading. After a few seconds, the hourglass turned into a check mark. At first, I thought that was it. It was just going to sit there with the check mark, and that was the end of it. Then, much to my surprise, my cell phone started ringing. Obviously, I was freaked out inside, but I answered it anyways. I said hello. The voice on the other end was digitized, thankfully. It basically said, "Here's your proof, thank you for considering our services," a couple of times, and then hung up. I was actually grateful that it was a robocall and not a real person, but I was also quite terrified that it was able to find my number and call me. This was enough to tell me that they weren't screwing around and that I needed to never go to their websites or question whether or not those hitman sites are legit ever again. Hey everyone. I wanted to post this story up in hopes of explaining some of the horrors that you can actually find on the dark web. Honestly, most of the things you find on the dark web aren't actually the horror movie cliché-laden websites that everyone seems to think they are. Most of the dark web is questionable or illegal adult content. People trying to buy medications illegally, etc. If you're wanting something like what you see in the movies, you have to actually know where to look, as in have the onion link. I'm not saying that those things don't exist, they just aren't easily or readily available. A lot of people tend to think it's like a dark version of Google where you can just search crazy stuff and be given the results within a few moments, but for the most part it's really not. Anyways, that's out of the way. I wanted to talk about a dark web experience that was honestly horrifying for my friends and I. This was several years ago. I think that we were 17 at the time, and we thought that we were hackers. I know it sounds stupid, but the three of us were all about the nerdy crap, the Python, coding, networking, and again, quote-unquote, hacking. I'll spare myself the embarrassment in explaining all of that. Just know that we knew our way around a computer. Naturally, the three of us gravitated towards places like Reddit, and then 4chan and such. I don't remember where we heard about the dark web, probably from a friend, somewhere on the news or on one of the aforementioned websites, but when we learned about the difference between surface web and dark web, our curiosity was piqued. We started looking into what it was, what was out there, and what we could do. And of course, we were enchanted with the hacker haven that it was glorified to be. We thought we would get on there, look at some of the questionable sites, and be the coolest kids because we accessed content that others didn't know existed. So, we did what we had to. We loaded up Tor, got information for some onion links, and got ready to have our minds blown. Of course, it ended up not being as interesting as we thought it was going to be. The sites were plain and bland. We saw a couple of them selling pills, others that we didn't even bother scrolling through because of the front pages, and a few webcam sites that we honestly weren't interested in. I think all of us were getting a bit disappointed in what we were finding, though I don't know what we were expecting to find. I think we just started clicking through and going anywhere and everywhere that we could get to. Looking back, this was a really stupid idea. After clicking around for a while, we ended up on a page that looked a little flashier than the others. I can't remember the name of the page, but I think it was something along the lines of "Your Choice" or something like that. As we started on the home screen, the whole page looked like it was a site for a butcher shop. There were a number of pictures of meat slices and cuts all over the front page, explaining the quality and what seasoning went best with each piece. Unfortunately, I think that you can all see where this is going. We ended up on a page with a list of cuts, and each of them had a diagram of a person. The part where the meat came from was highlighted. some of what was on that page was horribly graphic, so I won't explain it in this story, but you can imagine what all was there. One of the most disturbing parts of this website was its explanation on its sourcing. I recall it explaining that all packaging would be discreet, and that they would include their own special seasoning packets that would go best with what you chose. And what's worse, they explained that all of their meat was fresh and sourced on demand. They touted the fact that they had the ability to get everything when it was ordered. Obviously, we were freaked out by seeing this kind of meat. We got off the site and pretty much immediately removed Tor. We all kept up our pursuits in the IT world, but I don't think that any of us have ever been back to the dark web since. This story is related to one that you've told in the past. You could see it as a continuation or addition to it. I'm not the author of that story, but I have had a similar experience. The story in question is the one that you mentioned back in an older dark web video about those kids that ended up on the human meat shop. If any of you don't recall the story, first off, go listen to the video, but it was about a group of kids that were messing around with the dark web and ended up on a butchery site that listed human meat. And it also explained how to properly prepare it, advertised their seasoning, and gave all the information about the specific human cuts. They also touted that they sourced on demand, meaning that they had the ability to get the meat when you requested it, so they had it on standby. And they would kill and cut it when you wanted it. It's kind of like Wendy's fresh, never frozen promise, but for cannibals. Yeah, it was some really creepy stuff. And what's even worse is that it's legitimate. I can actually vouch for the legitimacy of the human meat market. I don't know about the specific page that they were on. It could have been a honeypot, but who knows. But there are a handful of actual pages that you can work with to get human cuts. I've actually spoken with people that claim to have eaten human meat, and they've told me that it tastes close to veal, but depending on the person's fitness level, can also taste closer to pork. I don't know about you, but that thought makes me gag and want to become a vegan. That said, I actually have a bit of a story about another dark web site that was similar, but it took it a bit further with their intentions. I'm not going to name the page. I don't want your listeners going out there and becoming man-eaters. Plus, it's super illegal to buy human meat. Duh. But there was, and probably still is, a dark web site out there that is dedicated to cannibalism. However, they see it as more of a religious experience than anything. You heard that right. They see the practice of cannibalism as a religious experience. This group of people that are on this page firmly believe that loving thy neighbor isn't enough. You should also gnaw on their shins with the bit of Sweet Baby Ray's. Sorry, bad joke. Humor aside, I'm being completely serious. This site was built by a group of people, a cult, if you will, that held a firm belief that the ultimate act a human could perform to get closer to God was to consume their fellow man. Their ethos basically stated that eating human meat caused a change in your biology and would make you more than human. It said something about how it was basically the only way to climb up the food chain, and that the only thing above humans were gods. Thus, being more than a human made you godlike. I remember reading a lot of the information on this site and thinking, wow, these people are completely and totally insane. But they definitely hold tight to their own beliefs and don't shy away from what they taught. Like I said, this was pretty obviously a cult, and it used all of the expected cult language, pushing you to become more than what you are, talking about how their leader was given this message from God himself, and trying to gather more members through positive reinforcements of their ideology. They had a whole section where you could sign up for a meeting to come and see what their group was about, which, to me, felt like a method of getting more victims. But maybe they were legitimately recruiting people. Much like the other page, they had all the basics of how to prepare the meat, what flavors went best with what parts, how to safely eat your human meat, which is an interesting thought. There was even an entire section of the page dedicated to their members and their rankings, their favorite activities. It was honestly like an icebreaker page that was made to show you that everyday people were also willing to eat other everyday people. Overall, this was a 10 out of 10 on my WTF meter, and if I disappear after sending the story, you'll know what happened. I just hope that they pair me with a nice salad to balance out the meal. My dark web story is one that actually happened recently. Within the last 4 or 5 months, actually. And it's one of the most disturbing and sickening things that I've ever seen or experienced in my 32 years of being on this earth. There are some really sick people out there. And I want to say to those of you listening, stay off the dark web. Enjoy the stories told by those of us that were stupid enough to get involved in it, but don't get curious enough to drag yourself into the mud. Like most people living in this quarantine, it's left me with an excessive amount of spare time on my hands. I am still employed, thankfully, but I get to work from the comfort of my living room. I'm not going to name my employer or my job title for obvious security reasons, but I will say that I'm pretty much the guy on the network team that gets to sit at home and watch data traffic spikes for the company's applications and websites. To be honest, I probably have one of the easiest jobs out there. I have to watch a graph system as it shows how much data our servers are pushing and receiving, and unless we get hit with a denial of service attack, there's not much to be done. If anything does happen, I have to get on my phone and talk with the other networking guys about what actions we want to take, and then have my weekly report call with my boss to tell her that everything is working as intended. We aren't a huge companies, and we upgraded our servers at the end of last year, which was perfect timing, so there's honestly not a whole lot to do on the day-to-day. Based on what I just said, you can probably assume that I know my way around a computer. I've been in IT my whole career, and I like to believe that I can hold my own out there. I know how networks run, I understand data routing, and I know a lot about data encryption and security. During the start of quarantine, I started studying more about data security and such, and I ended up being interested in Tor, onion routing, and how the deep web and dark web differ from the surface web. If you really want some interesting reads, you should look into the Marianas web. It's an interesting rabbit hole. As most technically adapted people do, I got both bored and curious about what existed out there in the deeper parts of the internet. I didn't want to do anything illegal, but part of me wanted to be familiar with what content and activities existed beyond the surface. I know that this is stupid, but boredom and extra time can be a terrifying motivator when you kind of know what you're doing. I went through the process of setting up my personal system to get on the dark web. I installed Tails, set up Tor, got a decent VPN after some vetting, did my security checks. I started going through some of the onion links that were easily accessible, and for the most part they were innocent sites that really didn't have anything crazy on them. I was simply perusing the pages, not getting heavily involved. I found a lot of what you would expect to find. Adult content, a few illegal shop sites, various conspiracy boards and other forums. Just some basic deep web content that didn't really stand out to me. Then, I ended up on a page that I would have never expected to see on the dark web. A dating site. I say dating site, but based on the explanation of their service and some of the profiles, I think it was meant to be more like Tinder. One-night stand interactions with little to no commitment. What I found was that the dating page was set up in what I can only call categories. basically split out into what you were looking for in a partner. It had categories for race, ethnicity, background, sexual preference, personal kinks, and even a section that was basically for sugar daddies. And if you don't know what that is, I'm not going to explain it to you. One category under personal kinks section had me curious, as it was something that I wasn't sure about. It was simply labeled Chasers. I clicked on it and decided that I would spend a few minutes looking through the profiles. What I ended up finding was nothing short of legitimately horrifying. The profile that I clicked on was of a middle-aged guy. He looked fairly attractive, and he looked like someone that would do well on the dating apps. I was reading through who he was, trying to figure out what the hell made him a chaser, when I got to the bottom of his profile. It read the following: I'm looking for anyone that can help me achieve my lifelong dream of being physical with an HIV-infected individual. The entire section further outlined how it was a goal of his to catch the disease, and that he was willing to pay almost any amount to do this. I went to another profile, and it was a young man that explained that he had been infected with COVID, and he was willing to give it to anyone that wanted it for the price of a nice dinner. The third profile that I went to was looking for someone to hurt or severely injure them while being intimate. And I'm not even going to explain the specifics of what this guy wanted, but he definitely needed to seek help. This entire category was of people looking to catch diseases or give diseases to each other, and a few others that were looking to be injured. A lot of them were looking to pay for these services, saying that it was a deep fantasy of theirs. I think the most disgusting one, besides the ones that I mentioned, was a man that was requesting to be with a woman that had terminal cancer. There's nothing inherently wrong with being with someone that has cancer, I have no issues with that, but he was treating it like a fetish, and he listed in his profile that the sicker the better. Again, he listed that he was willing to pay significant amounts of money, or even take care of medical costs for this. This site cemented in my mind that there were some very, very disturbed people out there. I closed it, shut down my laptop. I won't say that it was the last time that I ever got on the deep web, but it definitely made me more careful about where I went, and a lot less curious about what was out there. I used to be one of those people that liked to go on the dark web for the fun of it, and I would frequent a number of underground-style sites. I worked in the IT industry, and for some reason the dark web and the deep web are these strangely taboo things that we aren't supposed to discuss with normal people. But it's not exactly the best-kept secret. Those of us that do go out on tour and look at things that are, at their best, questionable, it's almost like we can smell it on other users. We all have this weird sixth sense that can tell if the person next to us is one that peruses the deep. Okay, not really, but typically we can tell by your demeanor if you are someone that knows what they're talking about. And most of the time, something on the deep or dark web will come up. I'm the kind of person that knows what they're talking about, probably a bit too well. Let me put it this way. If it was something that was shady, sketchy, unsavory, or otherwise a legally gray area, I was probably spending some time each and every day looking at it to see what it was. I spent more than my fair share of time on a few deep web community boards, mostly chatting with like-minded people that also had way too much spare time on their hands. My favorite pastimes were posting on conspiracy boards. It's kind of crazy to see what people will say when there's no limit or filter, and honestly, some of the things that they say out there may be more true than we would like to believe. Case in point, hitmen sites totally exist, and are potentially a legitimate business. Well, not legitimate, and of course I mean the ones that aren't honeypots anyway. Aside from that, there are a lot of marketplaces that exist on the deep web for things that are questionable. But the dark web, well, that's where things turn to the downright illegal. I will admit to having spent my fair share of time and money on dark web markets. I've bought things that are illegal to own, and I've seen things that I should not have seen, and things I definitely did not want to see. That said, I wanted to write this quick story about one of the marketplaces that actually kind of freaked me out and made me pull away from the illegal stuff. There was a particular marketplace that existed that touted itself as the be-all and end-all of dark web markets. And it was essentially this massive dark web version of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. If you were looking for something that you shouldn't have been and were willing to spend some Bitcoin, then you were in luck, because odds were that they had it. Bootleg movies? Check. Viagra from another country? Check. Computers potentially stolen from a government facility? Well, you guessed it. Check. However, it got a bit deeper than that. They also had services that you could pay for. Nothing like the hitmen sites, but if you wanted to, quote-unquote, have a good time with someone about to die, then you could. Hey, I don't judge others for what they do behind closed doors. I keep my opinions to myself and just live my life. That said, I actually stumbled on something that I initially thought, there's no way that's real. Until I messaged the seller and then, well, I'm not so sure anymore. It could have been a honeypot or a Fed trap, but if so, it was a damn good one. I was perusing the market one afternoon looking for something stupid. I think I was looking for shoes or something. Don't ask. That was when I stumbled upon something that's simply labeled new. I like new things, so I eagerly clicked on it and went to read what was so interesting about this new product. Well, this product wasn't really a product. The description read something like, and I am paraphrasing here, have access to any age up to 7 and can deliver. Forged paperwork is extra. Must have payment ready for any and all offers. Obviously, my first thought was that this was a full-on honeypot or a scam for people that were looking for children, which would be a fairly niche scam if you think about it. So, I mentally defaulted to honeypot. And because I was a bit of an edgy 20-something, I decided I would message the seller to mess with them a bit. I logged into my account on the market, and I went to the user to send them a message. I asked something along the lines of, how do we know you're legitimate and not a Fed trying to arrest someone? They responded with, well, you don't. Which kind of solidified the honeypot idea that I had in mind already. I responded with, can you prove that you're legitimate? I have the Bitcoin ready if you're an actual seller. Again, just trying to goad this person into giving me anything that would confirm my personal bias. They sent me a message back saying, boy or girl and how old. I had to think on this one for a second. I wanted to give him something that would be kind of tough to respond with. So I said, boy, around 5. He sent back some pictures of a little boy that looked to be around 4 or 5 years old. In the pictures, the boy was looking pretty happy. He was in a basement area playing with toys, and there was one of him watching SpongeBob on TV. I was actually getting a bit nauseous with this whole thing, so I responded back, is he the one that's for sale? At this point, I felt like I needed to gather as much information as I possibly could, so I could take it to the authorities. The seller responded with, he is one of them, yes. I then asked him to prove that he didn't just send me a picture of his own kid trying to bait me. He then asked me my name, which was a question that I had wanted to avoid. I was a bit nervous at first, for obvious reasons. So, I told him that my name was Marcus. It's not, but you don't tell people on the dark web your real name. After I told him my name, I hadn't gotten a response back for about an hour, and I was almost certain that he was a Fed that was tracking me at this point. That is, until he did finally respond. I got a message back with an MP4 attached to it, and in the video was the boy. He was playing with a couple Hot Wheels. In the video, you could hear a man talking, and I'm assuming that was the seller. The man asked the boy what his name was. The boy said Tony. The man then asked who was filming him. The boy said Uncle Will. And then the man said, "And who is this video for?" The boy responded with, "Uncle Marcus." He then asked, "And why are we making this video?" And the little boy laughed and responded with, "To find a new mommy and daddy." There was a bit more back and forth to prove that this kid was legitimate, and to show that the seller wasn't messing around. He then ended the video with, "Now that you can see that little Tony here is very real and in need of a good loving home, let's talk payment. I prefer Bitcoin, but I'll take any of the current stablecoins. I'll be waiting for your response." Well, you'd better believe that I took that information and video straight to the authorities, in the form of an anonymous communication, of course. I know, I am a bit of a coward, but when you're a criminal taking down bigger criminals, it's best to not put your name on anything. I don't personally know what happened with the case. I'm assuming that they passed it on to the FBI division that handles that kind of stuff, but I haven't personally been hunted down or arrested, nor killed yet, so I guess things are going smoothly. And yes, unfortunately, this should serve as proof that you can literally buy anything off of the dark web. I'm not one to ever advocate for using the dark web for any purpose other than pure entertainment. And even then, you should keep your curiosity a bit higher on the surface. Like, maybe at deep web level stuff. Satiate yourself with the pages that host the dumb conspiracy theories, the adult content that is legal, and the other anonymity-wrapped sites that probably could exist on the surface web right next to Facebook. In the end, the dark web is for illegal activities, not everyday use, and there are too many people out there that have a strange curiosity for it. Just don't. Full stop. I want to preface this with the fact that I am submitting this story as anonymous for my own personal safety, for a few reasons. But I also want to note that I do not follow the beliefs or mentalities of those in this story. When I was young, I fell into a bad group of people and was pretty much convinced that I needed to hate people because of how they looked. And I want to say that I was brainwashed 100%. I realize now how stupid this behavior is, and how stupid that mindset was, but a lot of younger men out there are a product of their environment, and it's incredibly difficult to not fall into these groups whenever they start to notice you. My anonymity is for two reasons. I don't want the people out there to find me now and attempt to cancel me, if you will, because I was an idiot, and two, I don't want these people to find me. That said, I wanted to tell you about one of the things that I found on the dark web once, one of those things that really makes you lose all faith in humanity. Back when I was younger, probably 10 or so years ago, I used to be the edgy 20-year-old that thought I was so cool because I was hanging out on all of the dark and freaky parts of the web. I'm not proud of who I was. I used to be on some of the boards that most people would see as reprehensible, and I was honestly brainwashed into certain things that, again, I no longer believe. Those boards are seriously filled with some of the most reprehensible people that are of the mind that they are superior in every way. Anyways, in my time on one particular board, I won't name the name, obviously, as I don't want to give them any clout or traffic, I got in with a very specific group of people. I'll call them the Knights for the sake of the story, but that's not exactly what they were called. For the most part, this group was very full of supremacists and other very sick people. And while I was sort of into the same ideology of them at the time, most of these guys were on a whole other level. I remember that they would discuss high-profile enemies, as they would call them, and they would discuss what they wanted to do with them. Usually these people were of a specific ethnicity or origin, and usually the conversation would steer quickly towards quote-unquote cleansing. I would personally stay out of these conversations and would just read what the higher-ups in the group had to say, and it was never pleasant. Most of the time, these targets would be politicians, local leaders, various TV personalities, and the like. It was pretty clear that this group practically fantasized about harming these people, and they would state their intentions as graphically as they could. While this in and of itself is pretty sickening, it's just words. Yes, words have weight, but if they aren't being acted upon, then they remain just words, and that's what most of it was. Of course, after a while, some of the posts would slowly morph from angry words towards celebrities to basically doxing people local to the posters. They would go as far as posting people of different ethnicities in their yard, at their homes, including a ton of personally identifiable information. Where they worked, their addresses, what they drove, their schedule. I remember there was one post where one of the members actually uploaded a quick video of himself breaking into one of their homes during the day. He mentioned in the video that he did so because he knew they wouldn't be home, and in the video he actually trashed their house. He rampaged through their living room, smashed their TV, broke mirrors. He seriously just trashed their house and then ran out and got away from the scene. And again, as terrible as destruction of private property was, it got worse. And this is where I personally checked out of the whole thing. There was a post from one of the users that was, I believe, in Texas. He made a post about how he found some people that were out in the open area near the border, and he made it very clear that these were immigrants crossing over. He detailed how he had spoken to them when he found them, and how he had told them that they could stay on a property nearby that he owned. He had led them to an abandoned business, again claiming that he owned it and let them in. Then, he said that once they trusted him and were thinking that they would be able to lie low in the building for a while, he pulled out a gun and, well, you can guess the rest. He was gloating about what he had done to a couple of people that were just crossing the border, solely because he didn't like them. He was proud of this. This sick piece of garbage was bragging about how he was a murderer. One of the other users posted a comment and told him to prove it, and that he would be rewarded if it were true. Well, I'm just going to say he did prove it. He posted enough information to show that he wasn't lying. He then posted a picture of a child and said that he didn't want to hurt the kid, but he didn't know what to do now that she was an orphan. That one user that told him to prove it said that he could take care of it and get the child out of the state and a bit north. He knew someone that would potentially pay for her. I stopped reading the thread after this mostly because it clicked in me how sick these people were, how absolutely disgusting some individuals can be. If anyone is curious, I did contact the police. I screenshot everything that I had seen, and I got in touch with and then personally met with a local officer. I showed them the page, I gave them all the information that I had, and I'm assuming they went forward with it. I have to guess they wanted to further investigate me, but seeing as how I was basically snitching on these guys, they didn't. Like I said before, I'm a totally different person now. I do not believe in any of the ideology that those people touted or pushed, and thinking of what I did believe back then makes me just sick to my stomach. To anyone out there that is in with these people or thinks like them, I hope that you eventually come to your senses. And to anyone out there that's thinking of hopping onto the dark web, please take this as a reason not to. So that was a remade collection of several dark web horror stories. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. And some people may come to my video and claim that I'm fear-mongering, and that's fine, whatever. Do not go to the dark web. If you are a legitimate person who doesn't have any intentions to do anything illegal, you have no reason to go to the dark web. Deep web or non-indexed stuff, sure. I can see how that could be useful to some extent. It does offer anonymity. There is a lot of... It's fine, but dark web... Deep web is not the same as dark web. Deep web is closer to surface level. Dark web is where the illegal activity happens. Not everything deep web is dark web, but everything dark web is deep web. It's confusing, I know, but just stay off. Just stay off that stuff. Don't do it. If you wouldn't commit the actions of people that are in my other scary stories, don't commit the actions of these people. If that makes sense. I think that's a good way to put it. So, hopefully, you all enjoyed this remake of these stories. These stories were all from, I believe, 2020 and 2021. I don't know if I've done one this year, but now I have, if not. So, yeah. If you did enjoy it, please do hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. You can also subscribe if you're new to the channel and liked what you heard. That'd be great. I would appreciate that more than you know. And yeah. We are officially at the end of our 2022 Halloween extravaganza. We have one video left. That's tomorrow's video, and that's it. There's nothing after that. Oh, there's a Monday video, but that's just normal stuff, so there's nothing after that, though. We're done. We're at the end, guys. And a lot of you stuck with it and watched my stuff, and I appreciate it. You guys are amazing, so. All right. All that said, this is Raven, my friends. I forgot my name for a moment. This is Raven, my friends, signing out. I'm done for the day. I'm going to go do whatever I got to do. Probably eat. I'm hungry, so. I hope you have a beautiful day, friends. Hope you're having a great weekend. And I hope I see you on the next one. But until then, sleep well.